so many of you getting involved in that last conversation about immigration. I'll bring some of your comments in before the end of the show again. But look, PMQs today. One question seems to be getting a lot of attention. Let's listen to it, shall we?
November marks Islamophobia Awareness Month. Last year, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution condemning the desecration of religious texts, including the Quran, despite opposition from the previous government. Acts of such mindless desecration only serve to fuel division and hatred within our society. Will the Prime Minister commit to introducing measures to prohibit the desecration of all religious texts and the prophets of the Abrahamic religions?
Can I agree with him that desecration is awful and I think should be condemned across the House? We are, as I said before, Mr. Speaker, committed to tackling all forms of hatred and division, including, of course, Islamophobia in all of its forms.
Well, that's a Birmingham Labour MP, Tahir Ali. I've got to say that I did reach out to Mr. Ali because I certainly, for one, have many questions I would like to ask him. Guess what? I didn't hear back, but I'll keep trying. Charlie Downs, what do you think is what you just heard?
Well, the key thing to understand here, I think, is the fact that the notion of the separation of church and state is a liberal myth. All regimes have a state religion. And so this question that you're seeing below me here, should the UK have blasphemy laws? It's not a question of should, it's which blasphemy laws will the UK have? Because the UK is a nominally secular state. I mean, the Church of England is our official church. But in the way we are governed, it is done along atheistic lines, which is to say the state attempts to act as a neutral arbiter between different religious groups, regarding all of them as equal. Now, we do actually have a state religion, which is one that sacralises minority groups, basically. We have hate speech laws, which are already blasphemy laws. But this liberal idea that the state is just neutral on this topic opens the door to aggressive religions like Islam, like woke, and it sees the institutions subverted because there are no defence mechanisms against these things. So if the question is not whether, but which, I would prefer to see, if we are going to have these kinds of speech laws, I'd prefer to see British identity protected, British history protected, and Christianity protected.
Using the internet without a VPN is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. We want to help protect you. This video's sponsor, Private Internet Access, is the VPN to help keep you safe. Now, you might be asking, what is a VPN? Well, a virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it shields your digital life from the eyes of those that are looking to exploit your private information. Whenever you connect to the internet on a public Wi-Fi network, such as at airports, coffee shops, friends' houses, or even in your own home, your data is at risk of being stolen. Hackers that are connected to the same Wi-Fi network have the ability to steal your personal data with ease. T-Mobile reached a settlement this year with the US Federal Communications Commission after they suffered data breaches in 2021, 22, and 23. In 2023 alone, over 37 million customers' data was exposed. And it's not just hackers to be concerned about. Information can be censored. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news content that you love. Private Internet Access is available for all platforms: Windows, macOS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one Private Internet Access subscription to protect an unlimited number of devices at the same time. Plus, we've got a huge GB News discount. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get 83% off PIA. That is under £2 a month, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee. So head to piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally.
Well, I'd prefer from my Prime Minister to have a set of chops about him and actually turn round to that MP and say, no, We
Yeah, well,
we
he
don't
agrees
have
with it.
blasphemy laws, thank you very much.
He sat down with Sadiq
We
Khan,
won't be
didn't he?
reintroducing them. That's what I would like to see. I do have to add, by the way, you just called Islam a religion of aggression. I've got to say that many people will be watching this shouting at you, telling me it's a religion of peace. Zoe?
So did Tahir Ali then actually call for a blasphemy law?
Well, many people would argue that by the back door, yes, he did. What he called for was measures. He didn't define what
measures. Okay.
And if he granted me a presence tonight, one of the first things I would ask him is, what measures? What do you want? What are you asking for? Many people are interpreting this, me included, as him wanting blasphemy laws. I'd love to know his breakdown of what measures he's calling for.
Yeah, because I think that's worth clarifying, because we do, as Charlie said, we do have measures already in place in the law. We have laws against hate speech, we have the Public Order Act. There are various things you can't do. You can't just go out and abuse somebody for their religion. I understand that people are concerned about rising rates of Islamophobia in this country, about anti-Semitism, and I think the government have to think about how they're going to respond to that. But I actually think Keir Starmer's answer was fairly reasonable. He said they're committed to tackling all forms of hatred and division, and agreed that desecration is awful, as did the UN. I mean, I think that's a pretty reasonable position, and considering the fact that Tahir Ali didn't actually call for blasphemy laws, I don't know what more you expect the Prime Minister to have said in that moment.
Well, first things first, I don't agree that anyone should desecrate a religious, whether it's a monument, a place of worship, a religious text, whatever. That's not for me. I don't think you should do that. I think, why would you want to deliberately offend someone? So it's not for me. I don't kind of condone that behaviour. I just think, why would you do that? But notwithstanding that, it is a free society. And people essentially should be able to freely criticise religion. And when we start calling for measures for desecration, I think back, my mind goes to a place called Wakefield, where there was a little child
where I'm from,
who scuffed, well, you'll know this story then, this little boy scuffed this Quran, and what happened next was so alarming to me and to many others. His mother, there was death threats put onto this family. His mother was paraded in a headscarf in front of what I would call some kind of, it was like a weird kangaroo court while the police just looked on. She was begging for forgiveness and essentially for her life, whilst people just stood by and let that happen. Politicians didn't push back to that. The police, never mind sitting there supervising that pathetic act, they should have been out on the streets hunting down who is it that's issued death threats to a little boy and his mother. They were not. They were sitting there. And I think when people start calling for more measures to stop people desecrating religious texts, again, something I don't agree with, then chills run down my spine a little bit, because I start to wonder, what is it that you want?
Yeah.
Because we already have these measures that you've just been describing. So what is it that you want? What more do you want?
And I think that is a question for Tahir Ali. What exactly did he mean by that? But I think when we're talking about the Prime Minister's response, I think, the government is committed to tackling all forms of hatred and division. Great. I think we can all agree on that. You said you don't like to see any religious text get desecrated. You think that's disrespectful. I agree with you. I think, since Tahir Ali didn't call for anything specific, I think the Prime Minister's answer was appropriate in this context without having more detail from Mr. Ali.
But many people have absolutely interpreted this point that he raised as calling for via the back door. I mean, he was quite subtle in what he said. This is why I'd love the opportunity to ask him specifically what he means. How did you interpret what he called for?
Well, I mean, he opened by saying it's Islamophobia Awareness Month. Now, I presume that is an ancient British holiday that we've had for centuries in this country. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a call for blasphemy laws, because we see this kind of thing all the time coming out of this particular, to use Starmer's language, community. But, look, there needs to be a conversation at some point had in mainstream politics about whether we actually want a religion like Islam making inroads into our society. Because we already have this chap, Tahir Ali, good British name, is a Muslim MP, and his primary constituency appears to be Islam, or the Ummah. And that's the case for a number of other MPs in the House who ran specifically on, Gaza, basically. There are 5 independents elected on that issue solely, effectively. So until we are prepared to have a conversation about how we are going to deal with this as a country, I don't think that this is going to get any better. Keir Starmer is certainly not going to do anything about it, because he sat down with Sadiq Khan last year and said about the need for blasphemy laws and to take measures against Islamophobia. Islamophobia being a completely invented concept by an organisation called the Runnymede Trust, which is a specifically it's an Islamic advocacy group, and it's an entirely political concept that, I mean, I don't view it as as legitimate. I don't think that Islamophobia is a thing, because this suggests...
Well, it is a thing. I mean, that's what a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, it is a thing.
Well, there's perfectly rational reasons.
And the way you talk about... The way you are talking about a whole group of people who subscribe to a particular religion, I find it quite shocking, actually. You might not like some of the things that some people say. You might not like the idea of Islam becoming, you know, the way that people are governing themselves, and you might think that some of it comes into conflict with some of the values we hold dear in Britain.
Would you live in an Islamic country?
Would I? Well, I don't live in an Islamic country. Well,
would you move to one?
Why? It's never been on my agenda to move anywhere. Why would I? Don't have. You're trying to draw me in on this issue as if there is a problem with everybody who adheres to the Islamic religion. That's just not the case. And I think you need to be really careful, because I think when you talk about groups of people like that, you demonise them, and you do create Islamophobic rhetoric by doing that.
But there has to be space to have a reasonable conversation about Islam. There are plenty of people in this country who practice Islam who are law-abiding. They work hard, they are really, you know, they're good people, and to talk about an entire religion like that, I think is unacceptable. But there has to be space to have a reasonable, rational discussion about the merits of an ideology.
It's not reasonable and rational if you are talking about the entire religion like that. That is not reasonable and rational.
I have not spoken about Muslims. I have spoken about Islam. I have spoken about the ideology.
But you've made several comments about, you know, Tahir Ali's name and the constituency which I would say are Islamophobic.
Yeah, well, but there are perfectly rational reasons to have questions about Islam.
But that's not a question.
Islamophobia implies irrational.
Those weren't questions. That was just mocking him and his constituency. And I don't think that is not acceptable, is it? Can't you have a grown-up conversation about the things you care about without resorting to...
But this is a man who is, as we've said already, calling for blasphemy laws in the name of combating Islamophobia. And what I'm saying is that Islamophobia, sure, there might be people who irrationally hate Islam, but there are also rational reasons to question it and its proliferation in our country.
And there are rational reasons to question elements of Christianity as well, and there are rational reasons to question conservatism and socialism. You know, there are rational ways of talking about this, but you have to be careful about the way you talk about it. And when you talk about entire groups in those terms, which are derogatory and I think prejudicial, I just don't think it contributes anything good to the conversation.
But when we talk about socialism, when we talk about conservatism, are we talking about all socialists? Are we talking about all conservatives? No, we're talking about the ideas.
But some people... Well, then you can talk about the ideas. You can talk about the ideas without mocking somebody's name or their constituency.
Well, I was just pointing out the fact that this is a very new phenomenon in our country, and one that nobody voted for.
I have got to point out as well, Tahir Ali, he is British, by the way. I do need to bring that point up. What do you make to this one at home? I imagine that there'll be very strong opinions on this topic. And I've got to say, it's the interpretation of what he said. I've interpreted what he said as him calling for blasphemy laws. He hasn't expanded on what measures he currently wants. What do you think to this? Matt says, in this country, we should be able to criticise all religions, any religions. It's a free society, and that must always remain the case. Richard says that this, trying to tell people what they can and can't say, what they can and can't criticise, is the first step to stopping free speech. He feels very concerned about that. Beth says, blasphemy laws for all religions or none at all. Tony says, please stop all of this. All we ever want is free speech. So there you go. Keep your comments coming in after the break.